Welcome to segment one of our deep dive on navigating from the balcony, the practical discipline that changes really everything. We're going to, as we go through this particular webinar, take some time to explore the what and the why and the how of the balcony discipline. It turns out that the world in which we live is a world where we are facing more and more challenges. And one of the challenges that we don't often acknowledge is the challenge of thinking and reflecting, and particularly critically reflecting about our life and about our leadership. The thinking challenge has been framed in a number of different ways by a number of different authors. David Kekich has put it this way, that you have to think about your stuff, and we would frame this, you have to think about your life. 1 hour of careful thinking, of effective, precise, hard, disciplined, and integrated thinking can be worth a month's work of hard work. Thinking is the very essence and the most difficult thing to do in business and in life. His point is that we have to think about our stuff, and yet we often don't think about our stuff, we simply get engaged in it. We dive in the deep end, and our head is down and we are focused and we are working harder than ever, but it may be that we're not working smarter. There's also this particular frame of reference from Alvin Toffler. His encouragement is simply this: you've got to think about the big stuff while you're doing a lot of the small stuff, so that the small things are going in the right direction. Toffler wrote a number of years ago a book called Future Shock. It was his prediction that in a world of increasing information and more change coming at us faster and faster, that we would experience something he reframed as a future shock. That is, we would be more and more disoriented by the amount of information, change, and things that were coming at us. And he believed that the issue of taking time to think about bigger things and the bigger picture was going to become more and more important, because we are going to be dealing with more and more small things coming at us faster and faster. And then there's the work of Peter Drucker, who is known as one of the most important gurus and management thinkers of the last century. Peter Drucker began his work when the knowledge worker began to come to the forefront. And Peter Drucker put it this way: two of the most difficult things to get people who are doing knowledge work to do are simply these two things. Number one is to get them to think about what they're doing. That is, not just think in passing, but think critically, think hard, and think clearly about what is it I'm doing. And secondly, to then do things in the order of their importance. Drucker believed one of the great challenges was that people are not doing the important work of their world because they never stop to think about what it is they are doing. These writers, Kekich, Alvin Toffler, Peter Drucker, are simply raising our awareness of the fact that we face a thinking challenge in our world and often in our lives. We believe that the thinking challenge can be greatly helped through what we frame as the balcony discipline. So what is the balcony discipline? This is our what question. What is the balcony? Well, the balcony is quite simply a weekly, monthly, quarterly place and time where you take time to get to high ground, where you can then think, reflect, brood, ponder, and pray about what it is that, from the high ground perspective, you take time to think about, brood upon, reflect on. And you do this so as to then take wise action on what is most important in the week ahead, or in the month ahead, or in the quarter that is ahead, or in the year that is ahead. And so the balcony discipline is a space and time. And we'll talk about how it is that we frame that and how it is important that you think about your balcony, that time and space. But quite simply, that's what a balcony discipline is all about. It's a space and time where you get to high ground and you think and you reflect and you pray and you ponder and you brood on what it is that is on the dance floor of your life. Now, there are other pictures and other rich pictures of this discipline. And we're zeroing in on the balcony. We want to give you that rich picture of the balcony and the dance floor. That's the images of people in a dance and then a person who is on a balcony. That is our chosen metaphor for this particular deep dive. But there are other metaphors that are used. For example, some of you have heard about getting to the press box. The press box is that place in a stadium that is above the field. It's above the playing field. And often coaches, and you'll see people as coaches and staff of football teams, and they're up at an elevated position, and they're seeing the game from a different perspective than the coach on the ground. They're in the press box. There's the high ground perspective versus the ground level perspective. There's the perspective of a bird's eye view. We often talk about getting a bird's eye view of things. What's a bird's eye view? A bird's eye view is up in the air. It's very different than the worm's eye view. The worm's eye view is on the ground. It's close to the action. There's then the matter of the armchair. Amy Whitaker, in a great book entitled Art Thinking, talks about great artists. And what great artists do is they take time, and most great artists in their studios had an armchair. They had an easy chair. They had a chair to which they would retreat. They also had an easel, so that the easel is where they did their work. The easel is when they were close to the action. They were there with their brushes and their paints and their pigments, but they would step back and they would get in the armchair. And Amy Whitaker talks about the beautiful toggling that took place in many artists' experience, because they realized if they were always at the easel, they would lose perspective. They would lose sight of what they were doing. They would get to the armchair and they would see it from a wider perspective. We often use the metaphor and rich picture that I can't see the forest for the trees. What are we saying when we say that? We're simply indicating that I'm so deep in the woods of my organization, my ministry, my enterprise, my for-profit, nonprofit. I'm so in the trees every day, I can't see the forest. Where I live, just a kilometer away from here on a mountainside, there's a beautiful forest that goes up a mountain face up to a mountain top. And if you were to walk from here and get into that forest, you might conclude that that forest is nothing but fir trees. But when you step back and you get above it, you realize that there are fir trees, but there's also a vein that runs its way across the mountain of deciduous trees, of poplars, of ash trees, of all kinds of different deciduous trees that are very different in summer, in fall, in winter. And you realize there's more to see than you think when you're just in the trees. There's also the metaphor of zooming in on things, but also zooming out. You see different things when you zoom in than you see when you zoom out. You see different things when you zoom out than when you zoom in. And then there's this final rich picture of getting outside the frame. The old adage is, it is very hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame. You have to get outside the frame. And so these rich pictures are another way to think about what the balcony discipline is all about. The balcony discipline is getting to the press box. It's getting high ground. It's getting a bird's eye view. It's zooming out. It is seeing the forest. It is getting outside the frame. It is sitting in your armchair, looking at your work in the world from a bit of a distant perspective, to see it differently. That's what it's all about. We're going to encourage you through the balcony discipline to essentially oscillate unapologetically as you live your life. You oscillate. So we're making the point that a worm's eye view is very important. Being close to the action is very important. Being inside the frame of your organization is very important. Being on the field is very important. being in the dance floor and in the action of what it is you do in the world, very important. But you have to oscillate unapologetically. You have to be willing to say, I'm also going to get to the press box. I'm going to get on the balcony. I'm going to get outside the frame. I'm going to take time to zoom out. I'm going to take the opportunity to shape my own time and space where I sit in my armchair and I look at my art and my work in the world, and I slow down my attention to see it differently than when I'm at the easel. So we unapologetically oscillate, and we are committed to think and to live with focus expenditure. We're making the point. It's important that we focus well and we work well and we go to our easel and we focus on what it is we're seeking to do. We get on the dance floor and we get engaged in the movements of what it is our organization, our mission, our purpose, our passion's all about. But we also think and live unashamedly focus recovery. In our culture, in our world, we are very dedicated to producing. We are very dedicated to working, to doing. We are very dedicated to making sure that we are in the action. Our culture doesn't do a very good job of encouraging us to refresh, to renew, to refine, and often, as needed, to refocus. So in this deep dive part 1, we're simply saying this is what the discipline is all about. It's about focus recovery so that your focus expenditure can be done in the best possible way. We'll see you on the other side when we jump into segment number 2, which is going to underscore why the balcony is so vitally important to your life and to your leadership.